this is the layout that we created. We don't have our actual station list over here, and we also don't have the activate button working, so that's what we're going to be adding in this video. Let's start with the station list. Again, if I were to show you this inspector, and we take a look at our props that's being console logged here, we can see the simulator object is here, and the simulator object has these stations, and we can see the name of all the stations here. So let's take these stations and throw them into this list. We can do that using a loop in React. So let's come to our CRM card here, and for our list group, we'll want to make sure that we get rid of this captain list group item. We don't need it, but we'll grab our props.simulator.stations.map. And we are going to map over it, which will replace each station with a JSX element. In this case, it's going to be a list group item, and we will give it the key of the station's name, and then we'll give it the value of the station name as well. And there are all of our stations. Awesome. Now we should make it so that when you click on it, it toggles whether the station is activated or deactivated. And then we should also add some interactivity to the select all button to make it so it activates all of them. So to show that it's activated, we'll use a very simple class that's available on the list group item. It's just active, and when that is there, then it shows up with this highlight, which is really handy. So let's come back here. We will need to create some state so that we can keep track of this. What our data is going to look like is going to be an object. It'll look like something like this, and it will have keys like tactical or captain, and those keys are going to have values. False if it's not activated, or true if it is activated. And we'll use a reducer in order to keep track of this state. So I'm going to comment this out so we can look at it later. But for right now, let's create a function. We'll call it reducer. And the reducer takes two arguments. The first is the state. That's going to be this whole object here. And the second is going to be an action. And the action is an object. The action has two properties on it. First is going to be type. And we can check to see the type to make sure we're doing the right action. So if there's no action, then we'll just return our state. What the reducer is going to do is it's going to take our state, and based on the action that is passed to it, it's going to modify the state and then return that state again, and then we can grab that state here in our component. So if it's a toggle type, then all we have to do is take our state and return it, but we also want to update the key for the station that is being toggled. So we'll put that in action.station, and then we will set that equal to the state, action.station, but then invert it. So if it's true, then it'll be false. If it's false, then it's true. And if there's nothing there, then it will turn to true. That's our reducer. Let's put our reducer into our component here by using react.useReducer hook. The first argument is the reducer that we just created, and the second argument is our initial value, which is an empty object. So the state is going to be the actual data, and then dispatch is what we call, it's a function that we call with the action in order to use the reducer. So now here in our list group item list, we can set the active to be state, and then the station name. And then when we click on this, we can call the dispatch function. Dispatch is going to have an object. Type is going to be toggle. And station is going to be station.name. Okay, so now it should toggle our state for each of these stations. Let's check and see if that actually is working. Awesome, and if I can click them on and off, so that's great. Okay, now that we have that, let's get this select all button working. To do that, I'm going to create a function up here. What it's going to do is it's going to loop over all of the stations and turn it into an object where it has the stations as the keys and the values are all going to be true. So I'm going to use a reduce function for that. So we'll get props.simulator.stations.reduce. This is different from a reducer what it does is it has what's called an accumulator, and the accumulator is changed every loop, and then for every loop we get the actual station itself. Whatever we return in a loop becomes the accumulator for the next loop, and then we also can provide it with a default value, which is an empty object. So this is going to be fairly simple. All we have to do is return a new object with our accumulator in it, and then the station's name as the key and true as the value. So that gives us our new state. Then we just need a way to put this state into our actual state value. So we'll have to add a new action to our reducer. We'll call it replace, and then all we're going to do is just return action dot state. Then down here we can call dispatch. Our type is going to be replace, and our state is going to be new state, and that will update it with all of the items being true. Now we just have to add this event, or this function, as an event on our select all button. Let's check and see if that worked. So now I can click some of these, but then if I click select all of them will become selected. Awesome. Finally, we need to perform this activate function. As we recall, we created a mutation, CRM set activated, and it takes the ID, which is the ID of our CRM system, and it takes the state, which is going to be a Boolean. So let's write the rest of this mutation. There's our mutation. Now, in order to call this mutation, we are going to have to use a mutation component. We'll wrap our activate in the mutation component and then make it so that when we click on this, it triggers the mutation. So here's what that looks like. First, I need to import a couple of more things. We'll need to import the mutation component from React GraphQL, or React Apollo rather, and then import the GQL tag from GraphQL tag.macro. Then down here, around our activate button, we put our mutation. It has a prop called mutation, and that is our GQL tag along with the mutation text itself. Instead of having its children be a component, it's actually a function, and that function has a couple of parameters to it, but the first one is going to be the actual action. When this action is a function, and when it is called, it is going to trigger this mutation. So all I have to do to make this work is go on click action, and then when we click on that, that action is going to be performed. We also need to add variables to this. There are two places we could add the variable. One of them is as a prop on the mutation component, and one of them is actually on this action function. I can put in variables here, and then I could just put them there. I prefer putting them on the component, if at all possible. It keeps the event here just a little bit simpler. Just have to put that function in there. So I'll add the variables prop, and that's going to be an object. The ID is going to be props.id because we passed the ID of the CRM to the CRM component. And then the state is going to be the opposite of the current activated state. So props.activated, pretty sure that's right. Yep, activated. But we just have to negate that so that it's whatever is the opposite. Now, to make sure that this is actually working properly, we should change the label here. So if props.activated is true, then this should say deactivate. If it's not true, if it's false, then it should say activate. If we click the activate button, it changes to deactivate. If we click the deactivate button, it changes to activate. So that's actually working, because in order for this to change, the data from GraphQL has to change. So awesome. That's how you hook up your GraphQL data and add the interaction, both for client-side state like this here, and for server-side state like whether or not it's activated.